Hi everyone, welcome back to another Simple Planes video. In this video, I'm going to be showing you everything I've done on the SWL-120 over the last year. So, let's get started. Now it has been a few months since the last video I've made, and in that time, I have done a lot. The interior and most of the cockpit is pretty much done now. There are a few other things I have to do to finish the plane to release it, but the interior by itself is complete. I did show a prototype of the interior in my last video, and the new interior is similar to that, but everything's just a lot more complete. The main thing is the seats. These now have textures, as well as some other little details, like the tray table, the power outlets, and some other random things. I've also added some other random details, like these exit signs. These do work as well, I can turn them on and off. Well, everything in the interior is currently set to activate too, because this is not the plane with the cockpit, but everything can be controlled individually, like exit signs, lights, and the passenger signs. And I'm not sure if I showed it in my last video, but now I have bathrooms, and of course the door for each can be opened. There's I guess not really full, but it's an okay interior. And it's missing stuff like lights, just details that are just there on a normal plane. But I guess that's beyond the scope of simple planes, or at least what I can do in simple planes, time-wise and partly skill-wise and performance-wise. I also have overhead compartments, and these can be opened individually for every single one. There's a button to open it. I'm not really sure the best way to show you where exactly that button is. It is in a logical spot. It's just hidden because I don't want to have it showing. In real life you obviously use the handle, but I can't do that. Or I could, but I'll have to make the button move for all 106 bins. Plus, virtual reality a bit harder to reach them. Another detail is crew jump seats, either where the flight crew would sit during takeoff and landing, or whenever they need to sit. These do not work, but I did model them, and they are realistically scaled. I also have emergency lighting, and this also works. And just like in real life, when it's off, there's a small grey outline. Now previously, to move around the interior, I had the galley cart, which is still here. You can move it around, but I've moved the camera used to move around to what I call the walker, or first person view. I need a new name for this, and it is what I've been using to move around this whole time. How it works is it's just a control base with 3 axes, and then I use the 3 main flight controls, so pitch, roll, and yaw, to basically just add up. So I just use the sum of these inputs, and that allows me to move around. I can also use space or fire guns to move faster. And as I'm showing you, when I look around, the pitching forward will always make me move forward, no matter where I'm looking. I was thinking of adding collisions, but it'll just be too complicated, and it will be a bit limiting. Like, how can you know when there's something outside the door? Or if you're on the ground and you can't climb up, then how do you get back into the plane? But I just left it where you can just infinitely fly around. I think that's pretty cool. Anyway, moving on from that. Another detail is ultimate class. This has been here for a while, but I have improved it. Mainly just improving the model and adding some new things. So I have the passenger signs now. I have resized these seats to be more realistic. I checked this in virtual reality as well. And this lampshade has smoothing on it, as do a lot of the other parts. And of course, moving forward, we have the cockpit, which now has a door, which can be opened. As this is what I call the fuselage mods, there is no cockpit. It also runs a lot smoother. But there is the cockpit interior, which is a whole new thing. I've just added some little things that you find in a cockpit. So you have your headsets, and this is set in like the 2050s era, so these are wireless. It is definitely not because I didn't want to model cords. It's totally because it's just wireless. And we also have window dimmers for the cockpit windows. Most planes currently, like in 2025 or well, older planes, there's no planes that have been made in 2025. They all have like window shades you can move around. But I decided to just add some dials and then call it a day, because that way I don't have to model more stuff. We also have an oxygen mask, some pen holders, a cup holder, and the geometry to get this into that wall is not that complicated, but it's more complicated than it used to be. It's just some fancy fuselage slicing. We have some jump seats where some extra crew sit, or it's really where like if you have like a long range flight, then the additional flight crew you'd have to carry for that flight would sit in these seats. They have their own headsets and oxygen masks, and pen holders and cup holders. We also have a fire extinguisher, and this doesn't work, but there's a step that in real life you'd like pull down and then you'd exit through this emergency exit if you needed to. Again, just some little details that make it more interesting. Then we have some storage, which there's nothing in here right now. Well, there never will be. And then some suitcases where they would go. And these rotators are meant to be like vents, like for air conditioning. And there's one here. Now, when the actual cockpit is here, this should just be on like the forward panel. But since this is part of the cockpit interior mod part, it just is there. If we just fly through the whole door. Another new area is the pilot rest area. So this is where the pilots, and just the pilots, not the flight crew, can go to rest when they're not on duty, for mainly long range flights. A light switch, some lights. Now just because it has simple planes works, they don't really light up anything, but they're there, and you can turn them on and off. We have some seats. This is just a direct copy of the business class seats. From my research, some planes like the Boeing 777 do have these seats. Then we have some beds, just two. This is also copied from the crew rest area, just rearranged a bit. So it's the same, I guess, item storage and then cup holder, and then overhead panel, and curtains. And then just some space. I probably should have added some straps, but oh well. Bit too hard to change that now. And then going through here, we have the avionics bay, also with lights. I'll just shut that door. Now this is not in any way realistic in terms of stuff that actually does stuff. I did do some research and look at some videos of an avionics bay to get some inspiration, but it is really just random boxes with some random buttons. It's just meant for details. And besides, if I wanted to make every single box, not I guess functional, but realistic, I'd have to pretty much plan out the entire plane, which you have like a whole team to design, which is far beyond the scope of small planes. And then over here we have some batteries. This is the ladder that would go to this hatch. Now in real planes, you don't really have the avionics bay connected directly to the pilot rest area. In fact, it's often in the roof, not the floor, but just due to how my plane is, this is the best spot to put it. This is meant to be like some electrical buses or stuff for electricity, and then some random cables. And again, in a real plane you'd have a lot more of these, but again, it's a simple plane, it's supposed to be simple, so I think 2 groups is enough. And then coming out of all that, let's shut that door. I guess I'll show you now the outside doors. This is something I've had for years, not sure I've shown it before, but these doors can be opened and closed individually with a simple animation. And we also have some bathrooms. The bathroom design is like the same, but just resized a bit to fit the space. I'll just zoom to the back now and show you the other areas of interest. This has also been here for many years. It is the rear galley, which is where a lot of the food preparation is. I actually modeled this while I was on a Boeing 787, and it is based on the 787 galley. and it's okay. I would want to change some stuff now, but I'll just leave it. This is the crew rest area now. Open this door and turn on some lights and go up the stairs. This is where all of the crew members and cabin crew, well, just cabin crew. Crew members is really just pilots and cabin crew. And anyway, this is where they would sleep when they're not on duty. It's some beds, all the same, just different positioning. They also have a good texture, and this is a real thing. They have seat belts because obviously if you have some turbulence when you're sleeping, you want to be buckled in, not just lying on bed. And in terms of specific elements like bathrooms or seats, that's really it for the interior. Got this bathroom here, a bit more cramped, but the same basic elements. And in case it's not obvious, I modelled these doors outside of thermal planes in a software called SketchUp. And in terms of the interior, that is pretty much it, at least that's all I can think of. I guess I could show you the cargo base. You can unlock the door, and then you can open the door. And then in here I have a relatively simple cargo bay interior, just some lights, a bunch of panels, and then the cylinders the cargo containers would lock onto. And with the interior complete, now let's move on to the cockpit, which is where I've made a lot of progress. I'm just going to use the first person camera to move around. So you can see where that vent is now part of that panel. They'll just turn it on. And as a reminder, pretty much everything works. All these little buttons, they all do something. Everything in here, it all does something. And it's all connected as well. All these little systems. They'll just get some lights, and I'll start the APU as well. In terms of specific changes, I could go on for hours about this, but to sum it up, on the center panel, this is now complete. Completely complete. I've rearranged a few panels, moved some buttons around, and refined a few things like the engine start dials. And now we're in this file. All of the little things about the interior can now be controlled individually. So all the lights, they work with buttons, same with the passenger side, and I also have sound effects. The evacuation command lights, or the evacuation lights, are controlled using this switch. This switch doesn't really do anything, but I did add it and a cover for it because it's there in real planes, and I thought I might as well add a switch for it. To get navigation, you have to use these buttons. Now if you want to know what every little switch does, I'm going to leave that for the instructional videos I'll make when I finish this plane. So we have, I believe everything is set up just for like turned on. Now on the center panel, there's a lot of new stuff. The flight manager computer, I have talked about this in several previous videos, so I'm not going to go over it too much. I've just upgraded it a bit and changed a few of the pages. So you have one flight plan now instead of 5, and some of these pages have also been highly modified. I'll just enable the mods I have, computer, items, no, Xinshan, I can't pronounce that, but I have that turned on right now. I can view all of the waypoints for those mod plugins and also the default waypoints. I'll just create a simple route so I can show you some of the other stuff. Right, and To Yeager approach. So the ACAS, so ICAS, Engine Information and Crew Alerting System, I believe that's what it stands for, display, is here. There are 8 screens, of which 2 really are actually done. I'll just leave it on the engines. But the new screens are these screens, the primary flight display and the navigation display. I did have these done in a progress update 2 years ago, but recently Well, I'm not sure how recent it is now, but at some point after that, I noticed the label-based displays were very laggy, so I decided to make some modded screens to heavily improve the performance, while also increasing the detail level. And these screens have pretty much no lag. Oh yeah, speaking of features, to get latitude and longitude to work on this plane, you actually have to enable navigation. So with that turned on, I think you can also have just one of these three on. You can now have navigation. If I just zoom out, we can see those waypoints I put in earlier. This will work with any waypoint, so if I had, where should I fly to? I'll just do waypoint Clarkon. Then that'll show up here. I do believe I am like sort of glossing over a lot of stuff, but to me, I'm familiar with how everything works, so I'm not sure what I haven't already explained previously and what's new. But any instructional video, I'll explain everything. I'll just sort of explain the basics of what's been changed in this video. On the center panel, at least the aft center panel, I have not so much new but heavily modified radio management computers, which is where your radios are on this plane. There are 3 radios now instead of 5 or 6 or something, and it's a similar process to enter them like it was before. You enter a frequency, press the period if you want to, and then put it into standby, and then you can change that to active. Navigation, this is where your ILS radios are. A lot of planes in real life have 1, I have 3 because this is a bit futuristic. You can have them digitally. I'll just put in a random frequency, this one is for rate runway 36. You can select which one to use for the ILS on here, and I'll get to this autopilot panel in a bit. There's a lot new on that as well. And further aft on the center panel, we have the audio control panels. These are pretty much a very fancy volume mixer. You can also choose which radio to speak on, and some other settings. These don't do anything, well actually none of this does anything. You can just click it. I'll have to figure out what this does when I write the documentation, but that's a future problem. And then just some other little controls. I'll explain all of this later in the instructional video. And just a bit about how this map works briefly. This is not some code that grabs the terrain around you and displays it in. It's actually displaying a bunch of texture tiles based on some images I made in Blender. So I traced around every single island in the game, including a lot of mod plugins. I then generated a series of images, which the map then displays. And you can also zoom in and out. These are actually different images, so this image is different to this image. There's also a clock. I'm not sure if this has been here in the last video. You can adjust the time. This is the in-game time compared to the actual elapsed time in real time. And you can set the duration of this time using a variable. I always have my in-game time set to a max of 3 hours per day, so this has been adjusted. This is also a, well, not so much new, but has been updated. In a previous video, this just used to be the tiller controls, where you can control the mode of the tiller, which is also for accessibility. So in virtuality versus computer versus if you have rudder pedals, you manage to have different levels of functionality. I also added the throttle split. Now since my throttles are a bit more functional, so you can split them, I needed a way to control both of them in virtuality. So now I can do that. I can just grab one and I'll also control the other one. Another new thing is the field control switches. Previously they were just some normal switches, like there's not many normal switches in this plane. Like these switches, they're just them. But I decided to just increase the detail level just a bit and added actual field control switches, which as you can see if I zoom in close enough, they do lift out, move, and then lift back down. I also added a few modules instead of just having switches on this plate. And then we have the flap range. It just shows you the safe operating speeds of the flaps. Now onto the autopilot panel, which is probably the biggest change in functionality wise. A lot of this is kinda new, but it's really straightforward. A lot of these don't even do anything functional aside from drawing electricity. We'll just start up the engines and then I'll show you the autopilot. Just before we take off, another thing I've added, there's a lot of new things, but I do not know what a lot of them are actually. Anyway, it is a camera that you can move around to view specific areas of the cockpit. I noticed that, especially in the two pilot seat views, it was hard to view the flight manager computer and some of the overhead center panels. So I added this camera that, if I keep pressing Activate 2, moves to 4 different views, or it cycles between 4 different views. The overhead panel, the autopilot panel, the flight manager computer, or forward center panel, and then the aft center panel, or radios really. And also, just before I take off, I'll just enter in my route. This is partly just for realism, but the destination is important for some of the cockpit sound, which I'll explain just a bit. We'll just fly to Yeager. Origin is right, destination is Yeager. There is a list of valid ICAO codes and some other information, like frequencies, that I will provide with the aircraft. I just happen to know a lot of them because I've used them a lot. Anyway, I'll just enter in some more flight manager computer information. And with that information entered, I believe we can now begin our flight. We'll just set the flaps to setting 1. What else? I guess we can now shut down the APU after enabling the engine generators. And also there's yet another new thing. This is the auto trim. This is just the trim I used for the autopilot, but separated so the plane can just have a trim that's trimmed perfectly for level flight. This must be turned on to use the autopilot. I'll just turn it on now. And now that I believe we're ready, we can now go ahead and take off. So I've added a lot of sound effects, as I might have mentioned before. What you can hear right now is what is called brown noise, commonly, which I guess could be commonly thought of as white noise, and just meant to be like the engine noise or wind noise that you'd hear. There you can see, I'll just pause it. On the primary flight display, you have the minimum speed, which is like the stall speed. This plane doesn't fly perfectly realistic, as in it just flies differently than what it would fly in real life, but this is about the speed at which you will fly out of the sky. The yellow bar is your low airspeed, so you can fly technically in this range, but it's a bit weird. You can fly out of the sky, and you also have a low airspeed warning. But since we're on the ground and accelerating, it's disabled. And then the green bar is the safe speed, so since we have flaps extended, I'll just go ahead and take off now. This is a safe flat operating speed. You can fly above this with flaps extended. It doesn't really affect anything, but for realism purposes I just added it. So based on our inputted climb, cruise and approach settings in the flight manager computer, I'll just put the gear up, we can set them into the autopilot. We'll just turn on the autopilot. And with autopilot turned on, you can see a few more features, just some target values, and then what's active. And since we're less than, I believe, 15 kilometers, maybe it's 30 kilometers from right runway 36 threshold, the ILS active and DME indicators appear. Right now we're just flying on heading 00. Heading 0, I think just heading 0 at our set speed and altitude. But to use the flight plan, and yes, this plane now can fly to waypoints, I can just turn on the flight plan. There are also 2 modes, intercept and direct. Since we're heading straight for the waypoint, doesn't really matter right now. I'll just toggle the cruise phase, just changes those values. I don't think some of this is perfectly realistic. Like, you wouldn't just have three buttons that set varies the autopilot, but due to my lack of advanced knowledge of how real planes work, and this being a simple game but simple planes, I think this is good enough. So what intercept does, now that we're flying from a waypoint to a waypoint, is it tries to intercept this purple waypoint path. Now direct slice to the waypoint. Intercept is, I guess, what I recommend, as it keeps you more on path, especially when you're making a lot of turns. Some other features of the autopilot are the auto land feature. I guess that isn't really the autopilot panel, but it is on the panel. You can toggle some features of the navigation display, flight plan, terrain, and their target heading. And now it's time to start descending. Another little feature about it is what's called vertical navigation. Now, since this is added kind of late in the planning of the autopilot, it's not like it is in real life. I just made it so you can pick any waypoint, and then the plane will try to reach the target altitude as it reaches the waypoint. And also, the only way to turn it on is by tapping the approach button twice. I'll just get rid of that third waypoint. And if I can sort my input information, I'll just get the frequency for Yeager and go 01 right, which is 243.425. So I'll put in 243.425. Then I'll select nav2 or ILS2. I'll just zoom in a bit. And I'll just start turning. So I've disabled the autopilot. Oh, so there's our first warning.
Flight slow. Flight.
If a rate of descent is too low, then the sink rate warning will come on. And also, the closer you get to the ground, the lower the rate of the descent has to be to get sink rate. So now we're on the auto land, not the flight plan navigation. And it is pretty much perfectly holding the glide slope and localizer. So to land this plane, all you have to do is just adjust the autopilot. I'll just slow down a bit. I'll slow down all the way. Just add some full spoilers. And then as I start hitting my minimum speeds, I'll add some flaps. I can probably put the gear down as well. I've also armed the spoilers, which means that as I touch down, they will extend. So now I'll just let you listen to and watch the auto land.
Approaching minimums. 300.
Minimums. 200. 100. 50. 40. 30. 20.
Glide
10,
slope.
5.
And there we go. A fully automated landing. Guess I can also add some reverse thrust and brake. The autopilot will automatically disconnect below 80 knots. And other than that, that is the last 1 year of building summed up into one video. Obviously I can go into detail about every little thing I've added, which would make this into like a 6-hour video or a lot of videos in one. But I'd rather just spend time building stuff rather than making videos about it. Now that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. In my next video, I don't really know what I'll be doing. It'll probably be another showcase video rather than a building video or a tutorial, since to be honest I'd rather just work on stuff than make videos. But in terms of the SWL-120, one of the main things I'm going to do is make a, not full remake, but I'm going to make some major improvements and changes to the engines, fixing some glitches in the model mainly. This should be just a simple red strip, but instead it has these weird cutouts, and some of the text is a bit glitching. Another thing I have to do is add some more liveries. Currently I just have the one. I also need to finish the ACAS display. These are the modded screens. This is actually still vanilla, so I need to make a modded one. And also, at least in the modded one, maybe not so much the no mods one, make all these screens do something, even though I always use this screen. As well as finishing the snake pad, which is currently, well it always has been, just a 3-part fuselage. I also need to make all the documentation. Now, in case you didn't know, the snake pad is where all the documentation is going to go and all your checklists. So, what I do recommend when you first get the plane, take a look at the documentation separately, and read through it all, and watch my video. If you need just like a quick reference, this will actually all be on the snake pad, using mods. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!